Sure, it's Edythe Evans. I do live in Stafford County. Yep.
How long ago did you move?
Let's see, I moved to the Fredericksburg area in 2001, so 13 years ago almost, this spring. And then I moved to Stafford just before I got married in 2007, in winter of 2007. My husband had a home in Stafford County, and so I moved in there. And I remember him telling me that he's originally, I'm from Florida, he's originally from Washington, D.C., and at one point, before I met him, he was looking for a house to buy, and he was trying to think of where could he afford a home near enough to DC that he could still have contact with his family pretty regularly, but in a place where he could actually afford to buy and his kids could go to a good school. And so he picked Stafford County, and he had that house there when we met, and that's where we ended up moving to. But I remember he said he told his family that he was moving to Stafford County, and of course they're all very DC centric. That's where they've been from. And while he was growing up, Stafford County was like the end of the world. You know, to go to Stafford County was like a full day's commitment. And so when they heard he was moving to Stafford County, they were, oh my God, you're going to be so far away. You're going to be so far away. Of course, now they come all the time to visit, and it's not so. We're practically, you know, in DC at this point. But I do remember when I moved here that I was not super familiar with Virginia, having been raised in Florida, and so I looked at a map and I saw where sort of Stafford and Fredericksburg were, and I thought, oh, I'm moving to Northern Virginia. And when I came here, I made the mistake of telling some of the locals, oh, so this is Northern Virginia. They were not amused at all. So apparently it's not so much a geographic line. I mean, if you draw a line through the middle of Virginia, Stafford's on the north side of that line. But the people who live in Stafford do not consider themselves Northern Virginia. I learned that pretty quickly. They have their very own character here, and they're very sort of tied to their history, and they, you know, like that to be recognized. Florida, I mean, you know, everything is suburban in Florida. And it's, but this is, I guess, of all the places I've lived, probably this feels more like a community to me, where I'm always surprised by the fact that as much as this community has grown and by as many people as are here, I can't tell you how many times I meet new people who know somebody I know, or are familiar with other people I know, or know my neighbors. You know, it's really only about 3 degrees of separation at most, I feel like, in this community, which is part of the reason that I really like it. It feels more like home to me than any other place I've ever lived. So I consider it, I mean, I'm definitely not a native, I'm a come here, but I do consider this my hometown. You know, my adopted hometown, if they'll have me, I guess. But yeah, but when I first moved here, the temple was in a little teeny tiny house in downtown Fredericksburg, and it was bursting at the seams. The very first holiday service that I attended, I was in the basement of that little tiny house because there was not enough room to put everybody in the sanctuary, which was probably not a whole lot bigger than this library that we're in. And they were talking at that time about how excited they were about moving. They had just broken ground on this large piece of land in Stafford County, and they were so excited to be moving, and it was this huge process, you know, kind of building the temple up here. And I really didn't know my way around the community all that much, so when they opened the building and they had us all come out here, at that time, you know, this area wasn't really built up. There was still a truck stop down there at the corner of 17 and 95. There was no Target. You know, there was none of the shopping centers that you see out here. And so it was kind of it felt like it was out a ways. And a lot of people said, oh my gosh, in the temple, it's so far from everything. And of course, now we're right in the middle of everything. And we have this beautiful library across the street from us. And all of these homes, and, you know, this whole community has sort of sprung up around the area. The truck stop is long gone, and, you know, now it's a kind of a busy shopping center. But I remember when I first came to see this building and how big it was, and I thought, we're never going to fill it. It's too big. I mean, it was so much bigger than anything we had prior to that. We were really in like a little tiny house, and boy, did I have that wrong, because we were full so fast, you know, that even now, you know, we're looking around going, okay, what do we have in terms of, you know, classroom space? And there's no storage space here at all anymore. It's all full, and there's never, like, you know, empty rooms. It's never quiet. It's, you know, it's always being used, if not by us, by somebody else in the community. And that's really kind of a blessing to see that, I mean, we've had, like I said, not just the temple here, but there have been a couple of schools that have operated that we've kind of, you know, helped to give birth to, you know, here in the synagogue, and there's a couple of other churches and nonprofits that have used our social hall for various gatherings. And so and the subdivision across the street, those folks meet here sometimes. I think they have a bridge club that meets here a couple of times a week, actually. So it's really nice to see that it's not just our home, but it's like a community center for people in the Stafford area, and I really like that a lot, that they kind of welcomed us and we've welcomed them. That's how it's supposed to work, right? So. Yeah, gosh, I think you can't be here 5 minutes before they draft you for something. So I think I was literally a member for about 5 minutes when they asked me to teach Hebrew school, which was rough because I hadn't studied Hebrew in probably 20, I mean, not since my bat mitzvah. So I was 30 at that time, and I was 13 at my bat mitzvah. So you do the math. It had been almost 20 years since I'd bothered to pick up any class of, book. And so the advice that they gave me before I started teaching was you just have to stay 1 week ahead of the kids, which for the first couple of years is all I really managed to do, is just stay a week ahead of the kids. And that was really fun. I've usually, for the most part, I've taught 5th and 6th graders, and they've put me through the ringer a couple of times. But now, after all this time, I think I've pretty much got their number. But I guess maybe 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, we started teaching an adult class, which has been really a lot of fun, because there are a lot of, for instance, like my husband, who didn't go to Hebrew school as a child. And so, he comes to the services and does things here, but it was really hard for him to work with his kids at home who were coming up and studying and getting ready for their bar and bat mitzvahs, because he couldn't read it. So we had a lot of parents in that same position who either grew up not Jewish and so wouldn't have had a need to study, or grew up at a time when, the parents just didn't send them, or they didn't want to go, which is, I didn't want to go either, but my parents made me go. And so now they were feeling like they were missing out a little bit, and they wanted to learn how to read the Hebrew so they could read alongside their kids or follow along in the service. And so we decided we were going to have this adult class and teach them just the same way we do the kids, just at a little bit of a faster pace. So they do the curriculum, the same exact curriculum, but they do it in 2 years instead of 4. And it's been great. It's been so awesome to see people like my husband who, started off not being able to read a lick of Hebrew, and now can lead a service or can teach a class, or, at the very least can help their kids with their own bar and bat mitzvah projects. So that's been really, really great. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to teach the adults, because they want to be here, and in spite of everything else going on in their lives, they make time for it. And it's neat, because so many of them have been coming to the services for so long. They maybe grew up in the temple or have a spouse who grew up in the temple, and so they're familiar with the structure, and they even know a lot of the words to the prayers we say, but haven't been able to necessarily read them. They had just memorized the melodies, and so it's kind of neat to see them read it for the first time and go, oh my God, I totally know that. That's what I've been saying all this long. That's what it looks like now, so that's a real treat. I like to go to the park. They have that now that Government Island is open. We live up in North Stafford, so for us, that's a really nice place to go. It's so private out there. It's so quiet and peaceful. And as much as this area has grown, you can go to those parks like that, and you can just kind of forget about the fact that Garrisonville Road is, 8 lanes across. And although it needs to be, I'll tell you what, when I first moved here, it was 2 lanes on each side, and it was a disaster. So the widening was definitely important. But I like the fact that we have enough parks and green space, and there's still pieces of the county that you can just kind of go out to and forget that, 95 and all the busyness and everything. I mean, the Rappahannock is a wonderful place. We canoe on the Rappahannock a lot as a family, take the kids out there, and it's just nice that we have all this sort of natural spots you can get away from, even in what is a pretty urban, crowded area. It's just nice the county has kind of set aside some land so you can sort of pretend that you're, still in rural. I'm sure for the old timers here in Stafford County, that's especially nice, because they remember when the whole county was like that, I have, definitely. I mean, like I said, when I first moved here, Garrisonville Road was 4 lanes, and they were talking about widening it. And I thought, well, that's probably necessary. But I remember even then talking to people who remembered when it was 2 lanes, dirt. And that when you would get off the highway to go searching for a gas station, you might have to drive 3 or 4 miles before you found one. And of course, now that's laughable, because, it's such a busy intersection. It's such a busy part of the county, is that, sort of Garrisonville Road corridor. But yeah, when I first moved here, there wasn't really a whole lot there. It was just kind of coming into its own, and now it's really its own bona fide, commercial center. So, but I think in those days, if you lived in Stafford and you wanted to do shopping, you had to go up to Prince William, and now not so much. Pretty much have everything they do. So, yeah, but in terms of like family time, we like to go out and we like to hike in in some of the parks around here. We like to take the dogs out for walks and things like that. My husband has been involved with scouting with his son, and so they like to go out and do sort of camping and hiking and, outdoorsy, playing in the dirt type stuff.
There's a lot of information, but anything, any other particular things that you can think of that come to mind about either the temple or Stafford?
Oh gosh, I'm sure I'm going to think a ton of things as soon as I walk out of here. I didn't prep. But no, it's just, like I said, it's a good place. Of all the places I've lived, I'm a military brat, so we've kind of lived all over the place, even though Florida's technically my home state. This area feels more like home than any other place I've ever lived. So I don't see me leaving it anytime soon. I think this is what, I don't know, I feel like this is what a hometown's supposed to feel like.